Oversight Committee launches an investigation now into the Rob Porter scandal after FBI Director Christopher Wray contradicted the White House timeline of events. Hello, everyone. I'm Eric Shawn in This Morning for John Scott.
And I'm Julie Banderas. Congressman Trey Gowdy saying his committee is now investigating the administration's handling of Porter's security clearance in light of domestic abuse allegations. This as the White House stands behind Chief of Staff John Kelly amid calls for his resignation in a situation complicated by the FBI director's testimony that the background check on Porter was completed last July, which contradicts White House statements that the Porter investigation was, quote, ongoing.
And a lot to go over this morning. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts live at the White House with the very latest. Good morning, John.
Eric, good morning to you. And the White House still responding a week later to this story about what was known by whom and when about Rob Porter and why the timeline keeps shifting. While no decision has been made yet, suggestions were being kicked around last night that perhaps it would be a good idea to have the Chief of Staff, John Kelly, and the White House counsel, Don McGahn, come out and brief the press. They're still toying with that idea. No decision, again, has been made on that, but there's a possibility 1 o'clock this afternoon when we have that briefing that Kelly and McGahn could come out. And this has all now been kicked up a notch with the announcement that the House Government Oversight and Reform Committee Chairman Trey Gowdy has opened an investigation into Porter's tenure here. Gowdy sent a letter to John Kelly today asking for information about the circumstances surrounding Porter's employment and the policy and practices that the White House uses for personnel with security clearance. Gowdy is also looking for a timeline. Listen here.
But I would want to know from Don McGahn and General Kelly and anyone else, what did you know? From whom did you hear it? To what extent did you hear it? And then what actions, if any, did you take? The chronology is not favorable for the White House. When you have the head of the FBI saying, we told you 3 times in 2017 and once more in 2018 for good measure.
The Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, today backed up Gowdy's call for an investigation and also issued a condemnation of domestic violence that we haven't yet heard directly from the president. Listen here.
But clearly we should, come on. Clearly, we should all be condemning domestic violence. And if a person who commits domestic violence gets in government, then there's a breakdown in the system.
There's a breakdown in the system, he says, needs to be addressed. This is going to be a big topic for the briefing today, as well as revelations that the president's longtime attorney, Michael Cohen, acknowledged last night that he personally made a payment to former porn star Stormy Daniels shortly before the 2016 election. Cohen, in a statement to Fox News, saying, quote, I am Mr. Trump's longtime special counsel, and I have proudly served in that role for more than a decade. In a private transition in 2016, I used my own personal funds to facilitate a payment of $130,000 to Miss Stephanie Clifford. That's Stormy Daniels' real name. Neither the Trump Organization nor the Trump campaign was a party to the transaction with Miss Clifford, and neither reimbursed me for the payment, either directly or indirectly. The payment to Miss Clifford was lawful and was not a campaign contribution or a campaign expenditure by anyone. In 2011, Stormy Daniels gave an interview in which she claimed that she had a sexual encounter with the president in 2006 at a golf tournament. She has since, on multiple occasions, denied that. Allegations were raised a few weeks ago that Cohen paid her for her silence shortly before the election. Cohen again denies that there was any sexual encounter, but does indicate that Daniels was paid to keep quiet. In the statement adding, quote, just because something isn't true doesn't mean that it can't cause you harm or damage. I will always protect Mr. Trump. And one other issue, Eric, that we're dealing with here today, rumors that were swirling last night that John Kelly, the chief of staff, may not be long for the White House and may soon be headed for the door. Those rumors were shot down by multiple people inside and outside the administration last night. It appears, at least for the time being, that John Kelly will continue as chief of staff. His job, we're told, is safe. But we'll see where all of this goes, you know? You just never know here at the White House, Eric.
Well, I see that the former Marine general will stay on his post. We'll have a lot more on this through the hour. John, thank you. Julie?
You.
All right, we've got new legal developments on DACA, a second federal judge blocking President Trump's efforts to end the program as the Senate prepares to debate the fate of the Dreamers. Here is Wyoming Senator John Barrasso just a short time ago.
It's time to act. The bills are on the floor to be debated and discussed. The Democrats don't want to seem to now move ahead with that. For my part, I want to make sure that we have a secure border. I want to make sure the laws are enforced, and I want to make sure our citizens are safe.
Peter Doocy is live from Capitol Hill with the very latest. Every day, a different story, Peter.
And Julie, we just heard that this morning a small group of Republicans and Democrats met privately behind closed doors about a permanent fix for DACA recipients, but there may be a snag in their plan to try to get anything passed on the Senate floor by this week.
I just came from a very productive bipartisan meeting where I think the group is getting very, very close. The challenge may be a little bit in the sequence of votes. People may need to vote for or against something before they could vote for a compromise, and I just hope the leadership in both parties, they want the Senate to function. Let this process play out.
The majority leader in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, is blaming Democrats this morning for wasting time. He's reminding them that they shut down the government to guarantee an open amendment process, but are blocking amendments offered by Republicans. And McConnell says the longer they delay, the lower the odds are of a DACA deal this week. McConnell is backing a bill sponsored by Chuck Grassley. It is called the Secure and Succeed Act, and it very closely mirrors President Trump's priorities.
The President's made clear what principles must be addressed if we are going to make a law instead of merely making political points. While our Democratic colleagues can no longer prevent the Senate from stalling the debate, they can continue to delay votes on amendments. I hope that won't happen.
And just in the last 10 minutes or so, we heard from the senator, the Republican senator who wrote the bill that McConnell likes, Chuck Grassley. He says he does not know if they can get to 60 votes with this package that does everything the president wants. It addresses DACA, it addresses the border wall, it fixes chain migration, and it also fixes the visa lottery, the diversity of the visa lottery. He doesn't know if they can get to 60 votes with that, but he does know that it can get something else really, really important, and that is President Trump's signature. And there's nothing else out there right now that we know of that could. Julie.
All right, we'll have to wait and see. The Trump administration appealing that judge in San Francisco and his ruling. We'll have to see if they'll do the same here. Thank you very much, Peter Doocy.
Meanwhile, Fox News is learning that the president's legal team is building an argument that he should not sit down for an interview with special counsel Robert Mueller in the Russia investigation. This amid new calls for a second special counsel to look into the FBI and Justice Department's questionable actions that brought the case to the FISA court in the first place. That prompted Wall Street Journal editorial columnist Bill McGurn to write this, quote, Representative Devin Nunes has rendered the public an extraordinary service almost single-handedly. The chairman of the House Intelligence Committee has pried loose from an obstructionist Justice Department documents revealing how the Federal Bureau of Investigation used Clinton-campaigned research to justify a warrant to spy on Carter Page, a one-time Trump campaign associate. So why are Republicans now threatening to undermine all this good work by calling for a special counsel? And Bill McGurn, Main Street columnist for the Wall Street Journal, former chief speechwriter for President George W. Bush, joins us now in the studio. Bill, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Why do you think a special counsel would be a detrimental move, in your view?
Well, there's three principles. First principle is special counsel's corrupt. Independent counsels corrupt, absolutely. Second principle is that what we really need to know in cases like this is what happened. We need to know what did Russia do in 2016 and what did the FBI and Department of Justice do. So the public's right to know. That's how we have accountability. And the third is that when you have a special counsel, rather than get the information which Congress has been getting, very slowly, but it's actually been getting in a good and healthy way, all of a sudden the curtain comes down. Look at Robert Mueller. It's been almost a year. How much do we know? You know, he'll announce an indictment or something not related to what he was investigating, and we don't know. And what we need is to know. We need to know what happened, and that's primarily through Congress, the representatives of the American people.
Well, you also talk about a U.S. attorney. Let me read you what you wrote in this, that perhaps a U.S. attorney should take over this, saying, quote, a better way forward would be for Mr. Sessions to appoint a U.S. attorney to investigate abuses of power within the Justice Department and FBI rather than destroying these organizations The goal of the investigation would be to restore their credibility by identifying any abuses of power and removing the responsible individuals. If there are these allegations of abuses of power, wouldn't that be an internal investigation that should be used?
That's the whole point. A special counsel is this constitutionally suspect beast that's supposed to be independent, but is in fact a part of the executive branch. The Department of Justice is fully capable of doing this, notwithstanding a lot of questions about the Department of Justice. Find a U.S. attorney from outside the D.C. area. Find a retired U.S. attorney like Andy McCarthy, up here in New York. Give him a team of investigators and let him go at it. But the purpose would be to find abuses, not necessarily to sniff out crimes. Maybe they do come up with crimes. Just as Congress, if they find a crime or what they think, they can send a criminal referral, as Senator Grassley did.
This has been done before, but some would say a special counsel or potentially or a U.S. attorney, they could run wild. I mean, we saw what Ken Starr did,
right.
From Whitewater and Paula Jones.
Well, those were,
Monica
independent I mean, that's why I think a U.S. attorney would be given narrow focus. Your job is to look at X, Y, and Z and a time frame. We need a report by X time. So the incentive for that is to get it done, wrap it up, not build an empire and expand your writ all over. Again, they could still do this with the special counsel Mueller by narrowing the focus of what he can look at.
And the Russia situation will be totally separate from what you propose.
Yeah, well, we have a special counsel looking into Russia, right? But I don't think it's separate from what Congress is doing. I mean, our system is based on accountability to we, the people, who act through their elected representatives. And one of the most horrifying things to me is watching people like FBI Director Christopher Wray suggest that he can't give information to Congress because it's classified. It just gets it backwards. The Congress is not accountable to the permanent bureaucracy. It's the other way around.
And what do you make of Sidney Blumenthal? I mean, he's been around for years worked in the White House for Bill Clinton, wrote a book about that, and now you have this weaving of information from Blumenthal apparently and Cody Shearer, the journalist that somehow gets to the State Department officials. So there's Blumenthal again on the left,
right?
With Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton's confidant. What is up with that?
Well, that's the question we need to know. Imagine a year ago if we were told that instead of a trail leading to Mr. Putin, we'd find it leading to Sidney Blumenthal. I mean, there's almost no scandal where his name doesn't come up in it. And the larger point is what it shows is that we're now hearing more sources outside the Steele dossier that all seem to come from the Clinton campaign or Clinton associates. And you just wonder, was any of this stuff from the Russians in that dossier? And
you think a U.S. attorney would be the one to go after that?
I think a U.S. attorney whose job is to restore the credibility of the Justice Department and the FBI, which has been very damaged, I think with a good team of investigators and a good focus could do it, yes.
All right, Bill McGurn, a lot of questions, a lot of suspicious activity. We'll see.
Yes.
Good to see you. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
All right, so President Trump's plan to end DACA hits another roadblock after a second federal judge has ruled against it. So how the judge's order will now affect hundreds of thousands of dreamers and those seeking to enroll in DACA for the very first time, we're going to tell you. Plus, one climber falls to his death and several others rescued at a popular climbing site. What went wrong?
She is unable to walk. She is unable, as my understanding, she is unable to physically move. So they have put her on a sled. They are roping her down, which is a time-consuming maneuver.
Or fell more than 1,000 feet to his death. This happened on Mount Hood. More than half a dozen climbers were near the mountain peak yesterday when they encountered a lot of falling rocks and ice. Authorities say the man who fell was airlifted to the hospital where he was pronounced dead. 3 others were rescued by this Air National Guard Black Hawk helicopter that you see. They were stranded on the mountain face for several hours.
Both of them are upset. They appear to be physically and mentally exhausted, which I think is a normal reaction to an event like today. They were part of the original climbing crew that included the gentleman who fell.
Mount Hood is notorious for loose rocks and warm weather, but climbers say they had never seen worse conditions than what they encountered yesterday. The identity of the man who has died has not been made public.
Breaking now, another federal judge blocking President Trump from ending DACA. The ruling requires the government essentially to continue processing renewal applications for the program, the Obama-inspired program. But now it is not required to consider new applications. Now, this is the second time in less than 2 months that a federal judge has ruled that rescinding DACA, which protects about 700,000 young immigrants, would be illegal. The New York judge saying in his written order, quote, "The decision to end the DACA program appears to rest exclusively on a legal conclusion that the program was unconstitutional. Because that conclusion was erroneous, the decision to end the DACA program cannot stand." Let's bring in Arizona Congressman Andy Biggs. He sits on the House Judiciary Committee and is a House Freedom Caucus member. Thank you very much, Congressman, for talking to us. So as President Trump is finding out, no matter how a president rules, the court doesn't necessarily have to rule in the president's favor. What does it mean for the Trump administration now that a second judge has come forward to rule against ending DACA?
Well, it doesn't really mean that much because you've got a district level court. They're trying to issue a nationwide injunction. And what you have is you have plaintiffs that are forum shopping to find judges like this one, who's an activist judge. He's got his mind made up. He made that pretty clear early on with some of his comments inside and outside the courtroom. And so it really doesn't have that much effect. Once you start getting up to appellate courts and the U.S. Supreme Court, then you would have some real power behind the judicial ruling. This one doesn't, in my opinion, doesn't really have that much sway on us.
So then you've got U.S. District Judge Nicholas Garofis. Basically, he in New York ruled yesterday that Attorney General Jeff Sessions had erred in concluding that DACA is unconstitutional. That's a quote. The state attorneys general and immigrants had sued the administration. So that's sort of what propelled all of this. So what does granting a preliminary injunction now really mean?
Well, it's just stacking up on the previous injunction that was there. And since Congress is actually taking it up, it probably has no long-term effect. The previous injunction was already, and the administration said they were going to adhere to that. So they were going to continue to grant renewals of DACA for those who were qualified. What this does is it's more of a, in my opinion, it's more of a political statement by this judge and the plaintiffs here than it is a real true judicial opinion.
Okay, so the Trump administration is going to be appealing the judge, the district judge in San Francisco. Right now, the U.S. Supreme Court is actually considering whether or not to take up the Trump administration's appeal after a judge there ruled to keep DACA in place. What does the Trump administration do if these district judges continue to try to rule against, replacing and getting rid of DACA? Does the Trump administration then go and try to appeal each one of these rulings, assuming there will be more?
I think, first of all, they continue to take the San Francisco case up to the Supreme Court. That's
right.
Number one. Number two, they have to continue to fight them at the district level, and then maybe at some point try to join those appeals if they go against them. The third thing I would say is they need to continue to try to drive the policy from the executive branch level that they want, because I think in the end, you've got this judge, for instance, said it's clearly erroneous to say that the previous one was constitutional. That's a problem.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to continue to watch as the Trump administration deals with this problem. Congressman Biggs, thank you very much. Appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Julie.
Other allegations of bribery, expensive cigars, and cases of champagne swirling around Israeli Prime Minister.
Right now, an investigation into a deadly shooting during Mardi Gras festivities in New Orleans, with police saying multiple suspects opened fire about 2 miles from the parade while people were celebrating at a house party. Witnesses describe seeing a hail of bullets. Police there say 3 people were killed, 3 others were wounded.
Cigars, champagne, all part of a brewing case against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And he's heatedly denying those accusations of corruption by police investigators. They are calling for an indictment of the prime minister on charges of bribery and breach of trust. David Lee Miller live now in Jerusalem with the case and with the defense. Hi, David Lee.
Eric, Israeli police are recommending to the Attorney General here that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu be indicted regarding 2 criminal investigations. And as you would expect, this is front-page news. In one case, Netanyahu is accused of accepting nearly $300,000 in gifts in exchange for doing favors for wealthy businessmen. The gifts, as you mentioned, included champagne, cigars, and jewelry. In the other case, Netanyahu allegedly tried to use his influence to increase circulation of a newspaper in exchange for favorable coverage. Ironically, that newspaper today has a single-word headline: bribery. A defiant Netanyahu delivered an emotional live statement last night. He said he has no intention of stepping down and accused the police of being biased. And speaking just hours ago in Tel Aviv, Netanyahu said his coalition government is stable, and he attacked the police recommendation calling for his indictment.
After I read the recommendation report, I can say it is biased, extreme, full of holes, like Swiss cheese.
For now, Netanyahu's coalition partners are not calling for his removal from office. The harshest criticism coming from his political allies was a statement from one minister that said he is not living up to the standard expected of an Israeli leader. Opposition parties, meanwhile, are calling for the prime minister to resign. The next step now will be for the attorney general here to either reject or accept the police recommendation calling for an indictment. If Netanyahu is indicted, tried, and convicted, he could be sent to prison. Eric?
All right, David Lee, we'll await the Attorney General's decision. Thank you. Julie?
Breaking new details now on the Rob Porter scandal as Congress gets involved with new questions about the handling of classified material inside the West Wing. Plus, cracking down on illegal immigration. Fox News takes you along as ICE agents target criminals wanted for deportation.
This is what we swore to do in order to keep America safe, and that's what we're going to continue to do.
ICE agents making their presence felt in California. More than 100 agents conducting their very first large raid targeting illegal aliens with criminals with records since California became the first sanctuary state in the U.S. William Lajeunesse went along with some agents, and he joins us now live from Los Angeles. Hey, William.
Well, Julie, 150 arrested over a 3-day period. Now, California is doing all it can to stop any immigration enforcement, including those who are targeted in this operation, being immigrants who have repeatedly entered the U.S. illegally, those who were already ordered deported by a judge but ignored it, and those who committed crimes. A judge ordered this man, found pumping gas, deported in 1996. 2 years ago, he was convicted of lewd acts with a minor. You've been here since 1996, and you're telling me you don't speak English?
No, poquito.
He served 28 days in jail, but the county refused to hand him over for deportation, forcing ICE to find him here.
We are just enforcing the laws as they're written, right? Someone that's in this country illegally has violated those laws.
Today's operation is the latest chapter in the escalating fight between the state of California and the federal government, which says it will enforce the law, sanctuary state or not.
California better hold on tight. They're about to see a lot more special agents.
California became the nation's first sanctuary state in January.
No ban, no walls, sanctuary for all.
Local politicians claim the sanctuary law brings comfort to families living in fear.
Well, I'm disappointed. I thought I was protected by being a sanctuary city or state, but I'm not. Everybody's vulnerable.
Married 28 years with 2 American-born sons, this man from Honduras thought ICE would overlook his conviction on food stamp fraud. He was wrong.
If you have any type of criminal background or involvement with the police and you're not a citizen, you're going to get picked up.
So ICE says that 40% of those that they're trying to deport have already been released from local jails. So before California was a sanctuary state, they would have been deported directly from jail by a single agent who was doing a fingerprint check. Well, now you've got 6 to 8 agents, Julie, spending hours trying to find one guy. It's expensive for taxpayers, dangerous to police. But California says it means their illegal immigration population does not have to live in fear. Back to you.
All right, William Lajeunesse, thank you so much.
Chronology is not favorable for the White House. When you have the head of the FBI saying, we told you 3 times in 2017 and once more in 2018 for good measure, then I think the really fair questions are, what were you told? By whom were you told it? Did you have some reason to question what the Bureau told you? And if none of that is true, why did you keep him on?
Oh, that's House Oversight Committee Chairman, Republican Congressman Trey Gowdy, being pretty tough on the Trump administration's answers, saying he is now investigating the White House's handling of the Rob Porter controversy. This, of course, one day after FBI Director Chris Wray contradicted the White House's timeline of events.
The FBI submitted a partial report on the investigation in question in March. And then a completed background investigation in late July. That is soon thereafter, we received requests for follow-up inquiry, and we did the follow-up and provided that information in November, and then we administratively closed the file in January. And then earlier this month, we received some additional information, and we passed that on as well.
So where will this go, and what does it mean? Michael Starr Hopkins joins us, an attorney and Democratic strategist and contributor for The Hill. And Amos Snead, former press secretary to House Republican Whip Roy Blunt and founding partner at S3 Public Affairs. Hello to you both. Good morning.
Morning. Hey, good morning.
Amos, let me start with you. You heard what Gowdy said, that the chronology does not favor the White House. And the White House is claiming there was a bottleneck at the Personnel Security Office. Do you think that defense holds any water?
You know, I think if you look at this and you see the news that you just ran the segment and that Gowdy last night said they're going to open an investigation of this, just take a minute and think about Chairman Gowdy. I mean, this is someone who has a love and appreciation of the law. He's actually leaving Congress to go back and practice law. So I think this is, you know, he's someone that will call balls and strikes throughout this investigation. So, and then you saw Speaker Ryan come out this morning saying they were also supporting this. So this is not the last we're hearing of this.
So what do you think? What do you think went on over at the White House? Because you just heard Christopher Wray said they had the report in March, they finished it in July, they had more information in November, and they closed it last month. Yet Porter was kept on. Amos?
I mean, I think if you look at this, I mean, I work in public relations. So if you're looking at this from a crisis communication standpoint, you know, first of all, you want to know what all the facts are, and you want to have the full picture before you go public with anything. I don't really think that happened here, and this is why we're on, what, day 8, day 9 of this. So I don't know if anybody that was outside of that room truly knows what's going on, but we're going to continue to hear about it.
So, Michael, what do you think went on at the White House?
You know, to be honest, I don't know. I don't know which is more troubling, the fact that the White House keeps lying about what happened, or the fact that the president hasn't come out and defended these women. Instead, he's come out and attacked them. And it just, you know, the moral deficit going on in the White House is starting to look like the Grand Canyon.
Well, you know, the White House wouldn't say they're lying. I mean, Sarah Sanders went out yesterday and said it was the personnel office, that they had it bottled up, and the senior officials didn't know. I mean, they certainly didn't have that horrible photograph of the black eye.
Of course they're not going to say they're lying. Liars don't say they lie. They lie. But when you look at the facts, I mean, even Trey Gowdy said that facts matter. And here, they were obviously notified 3 different times. John Kelly came out and said that there was a 40-minute increment of time between when he knew and when he fired Porter. That's been determined to be not true. Sarah Sanders instead allowed, 4 reporters to interview Rob Porter about 3 separate incidences of abuse. Look, this guy shouldn't be in the White House. He shouldn't even be cleaning the toilets in the White House. And the fact that he was there as long as he would, it just, you know, it's another pox in our house.
Well, you know, the Wall Street Journal today, let me read you part of the interview, because there are the calls for Kelly to step aside, yet the Fox's reporting is that Mr. Kelly, the general, has all the confidence of the president. And this is what the Wall Street Journal says this morning, quote, unless President Trump has lost confidence in the former Marine general, it isn't clear what good his dismissal would do beyond satisfying Mr. Trump's opponents. Our guess is that amid the 25 items in his inbox, Mr. Kelly wanted to keep one of his best deputies if he could. This may be a violation of the Me Too movement's view that all accusations are instantly believable, but it isn't by itself a firing offense. But, you know, Amos,
that's disgusting.
That's it. You have the photo. You have these allegations, 2 ex-wives, and other concerns. I mean, is that even appropriate?
Hey, I mean, I think any way you look at this is a tragic situation that has been mishandled, and it's continued to be almost a week and a half of coverage on this. And, you know, everybody runs to their corners on this, and they go to their political corners, and you'd rather talk about this than what's happening legislatively, what's happening with the economy. I think General Kelly will be safe there, and I think that we're going to continue to hear about this, especially when you're starting to see Chairman Gowdy and Speaker Ryan say that they're looking into it.
Well, it is a major issue, certainly when you have these type of accusations of abuse. Michael, last word.
I just want to say some things aren't political, and I think this should be one of them. When, you know, multiple women come forth and say that they were physically abused, there's picture evidence. You know, Rob Porter was almost made the deputy chief of staff. It's time for Kelly to go. He's out.
Well, right now he has the confidence of the White House, we're told, so see how this all plays out.
Says a lot about the White House.
Thank you. Julie?
Thank you.
All right, U.S. forces have reportedly killed dozens of Russian mercenaries as the battle to rid Syria of ISIS becomes more complicated. Why our next guest says the war there will only get worse. Plus, police respond to a fast and furious situation in Florida, but this driver wasn't exactly running from the law. Details on this frightening story coming up next.
Have you tried the emergency brake?
Yeah, ma'am, I'm not pulling that at no 100 miles an hour, ma'am. I'm sorry.